your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story. Reverend Dr. D here, and we're here to give you new paradigms for a new world. We've got a very interesting program, and I hope that you will stay with us. We are going to be talking with a gentleman who has written an interesting book. The title is maybe on one hand a little deceptive, especially if you don't understand the term. The title of the book is A Dog Soldier. No, I take that back. I'm trying to. They put across they put across my book the other thing, but it is a dog, something along the. I'm going to have my guest talk about this.
It's a dog before soldier.
Thank you. Before soldier. Okay, A Dog Before Soldier. The publishing company put this band across the top, and it covered over before. All right, but that be that as it may. Thank you, first of all, for being with us here on the program, and also we appreciate the service that you have given to our country through your time in the military, which we are going to talk about because this book is about that. So we really appreciate your being here.
Dr. D, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with you today and to reach out to your viewership.
Well, there are many of us, myself included, of course, who wish that the military didn't have to exist. If we could only just get along with people of other parts of the world, other cultures, other belief systems, other political systems, economic, etc., etc. However, the world in which we live requires us, under the present circumstances, to have what we have. And I will, first of all, applaud the military, at least in this country, and it may be in other places, for example, like Israel, where they require, 2 years military service for every, I think it's now male and female citizen, so that they have an understanding. And there's one real important factor I wish could be incorporated within our citizenry, all right? And that is the bond that is created within the members of the military, regardless of the branch. It isn't just about no man left behind and I've got your 6, but it goes beyond that you, though you are an individual, you're there as part of a unit and you have to work together. And I wish that we could incorporate more of that into our societies and civilization. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, a basic tenet of being in the military is you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. And, from the beginning, and everybody goes through a little bit of a boot camp or, indoctrination, whatever you want to call it. to reinforce that, you're what's important to you, what you need is not as what's important as what the unit needs. And so, you learn very quickly that, your place in life is to support the team, and there's nothing more important. And when you're involved in something that's operational or real, your reason for being focuses on two things. Number one, doing your job, and number two, doing your job, because if you don't do your job, you're going to cause harm to your teammates. And the
Mm.
last thing in the world that you want to do, you'd rather have harm done to yourself than to you be the cause of something happening to your teammates, because you become so passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I would say also that um, we have a country that's so large, it would be impractical to have everybody join the military. But there's other ways to perform government service. It doesn't have to be through the military. It can be through the Peace Corps or some other thing. That's always debated as to whether or not we can do that, and that's something that's constantly actually debated even to this day. Whether or not that's a practical solution, but it doesn't have to be through the military.
Mm. I know that when I was in high school, there was what was called ROTC, and there were quite a number of guys that would sign up for that. I'm not sure back in the 70s that gals were in it or not. I'm not 100% certain. All I know is that there was sort of that beginnings of and an attempt to maybe inculcate within the minds and hearts of individuals what you have just been talking about.
Yeah,
I know there's also the National Guard, which is
yeah,
another level, and so forth. And even the Coast Guard is considered, I believe, to be part of. I don't know that I want to say necessarily the military process or one of the groups, but nonetheless, I know that my wife's father many years ago here on the Central Coast. She says he was a member of the Coast Guard and, of course, the harbor here in Santa Barbara County and so
yeah.
forth. So we've got a lot of connections there. What is interesting is the work that you have put together here after spending some 24 years in the U.S. Navy as a helicopter pilot. I'm curious as to, first of all, why you chose the Navy and how you became a helicopter pilot.
Well, that's a good question. We could actually be here for the rest of the day talking about that one. But um, I have to tell you that, first of all, my daughter's in ROTC, Navy ROTC, where she goes to college, and I was part of ROTC myself when I was in college. When I was in high school, the last thing I wanted was to be in the military. However, I went to a Merchant Marine Academy, a Maine Maritime Academy up in Maine, purely because that was a way to support myself, and I thought I had a good chance of getting a job. Along the way, I ran into financial trouble, and the Navy actually offered me a scholarship. So I went in as a business decision because I needed the money to finish my school.
Mm.
And I really didn't know what I was getting into and really didn't care at the time. I was focused on just taking care of myself. And along the way, I qualified for flight school. I went and did that. I thought, quite frankly, I didn't care about flying. I thought girls would like me better if I was a pilot. So, so that was where my 22-year-old mind was at the time. But, I stayed in for 24 years because I found that I'd become part of a family. And it was tough love, but it was love. And
Mm.
I just really liked being a naval officer and everything that went along with it. So, went far beyond being a pilot. I just liked being part of that, what I considered, a team and a family, that I went to work every day. It was never a job for me. It was, there were some things that I did were unpleasant, or I didn't, really want to do those for a long time. But overall, I have nothing good to say. And the pleasure, when people thank me for my service, I laugh, because, it's like thanking someone to go to, that went to a nice restaurant. I mean, I have nothing but good memories and a ton of friends from that experience.
I
So,
need to get from someone who's been in the military a better, excuse me, a better explanation so that I understand. The military, regardless of branch, is not a democracy like I might think, or other people who are civilians might think a democracy is, or for that matter, even a republic. That you do not get to call the shots, especially if you're in combat.
No.
And I know there are certain rules, okay, that in terms of the oath that you take going into the military. What, and again, I'm not, this has nothing to do with politics whatsoever. I'm just curious, how would you describe the infrastructure um, from comparing it to our our way of life in America, in the United States? From my observations, it's not a democracy. You don't get to call your own shots, so forth. How would you describe the infrastructure in that regard?
Well, there is a structure for sure, and as you say, it's not a democracy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It has to be like that because push comes to shove in a conflict. Everybody has to move as a team,
Hmm.
and if you don't, bad things happen. But I used to joke, and it was a joke, but there's a lot of truth in this. I used to joke that I was part of a mafia, and and that I had people that were looking out for me, and my success or lack of success was based on my performance and my reputation. So I had to preserve that, and I had someone looking over me. At times, I never really was ever told what to do. I just knew what was expected of me, and what the outcomes were. If I didn't do what was expected of me, and that was never a problem for me. I was never asked to do something that I disagreed with. But very much, you're, it's very much like a mafia where you can be taken out back at any time and disposed of, career wise
Hmm.
for doing the wrong thing. But there's an expectation and there's a standard. It's very well defined. It's not hard to figure out, and so things are clear. And it's not. You understand that it's not a democracy. That it can't be because of the job you might be asked to do. You could be, like myself, in 24 years, and not. I mean, there were times when I was part of an armed conflict. I was part of the Iran-Iraq War. Clearing mines from the Persian Gulf, Straits of Hormuz, like what's going on now. I mean, and those were kind of tense times, but for the most part, it was a very benign environment. A lot of training, a lot of flying at night, which is dangerous in itself. But you could go through a career in the military and never be asked to do something dangerous, but you're on retainer, and you understand that you're on retainer. And the times you have to go out and do something, you say to yourself, "Well, I signed up for this, and if I don't do it, I'm going to let everybody down around me."
Hmm.
So um, I had a boss, who was very much like a mafioso, and in fact, a couple of them. And I quite enjoyed working for them because those guys were the most clear of everybody.
Mm.
If you do this, you'll be good. If you're on this side of the line, you won't be good. And it's a very refreshing environment. Actually, what gets people confused is when they get out of the military back into the civilian life, and there's a lot of ambiguity. You're not sure who's in charge. You're not sure who to go to. Things are not clear anymore, and that's what makes a transition back out of the military very difficult because you don't have that clarity anymore.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the biggest thing.
Years ago, I interviewed a producer of a film that followed members, former Vietnam vets, through this program. I'll call it a personal growth program. And we were chatting about this, and I actually did watch the movie, and it was fascinating. And in our conversation, I says, so is the process that needs to happen here, in reference, of course, to the movie, the documentary, that the soldiers need to learn how to acclimate to civilian life? And the producer said, no. It's not the soldiers that need to acclimate to civilian life. It's the civilians that need to acclimate to not so much military life, but the awareness of what these men and women were a part of, and still, of course, still are a part of, in to have a better understanding and appreciation. I've done a little research into history in terms of armies and civilizations and so forth of years gone by, going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it used to be that win or lose, when the soldiers returned to their community, their village, their tribe, again, win or lose, they were honored, they were supported, they were cared for. So I brought that forward to this particular gentleman, the producer of this film, and I said, so when did we lose that here in the United States? And I was shocked when he told me, he says, the way that our soldiers have been treated over the last few hundred years, it's been going on, and actually he used the word mistreated. It's by the government, has been going on since the Revolutionary War. So from the very beginning, and that to me is sad, but I'll tell you the positive or upside is that the civilian community has stepped up, and they may not fully understand what you and others have been through. What they understand is you've been through something and you need some support. You need some encouragement and so forth, and guidance if necessary, therapy, and so on and so forth. And that's the plus. And that to me is what really makes this country the country that it is. It's the people. I had a friend who had a bumper sticker on his truck. He says, "I love my country," referring to the people. It's the government I don't trust. and it's really sad. And I'm curious about your experience since being out of the military. And don't worry, we will get to conversations about your book here because it's fascinating. Yeah. What has been your personal experience with civilians, and now walking amongst them, living in a civilian lifestyle and society?
Well, I've been fairly lucky. I don't have a lot of issues. I've been treated pretty well. I'm also not a guy that goes around waving a flag to tell everybody I'm a veteran. I don't tell anybody. If somebody knows, that's fine. We'll talk about it. But even though that's a good memory for me, I try to leave that behind me. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge for me has been, transitioning to the corporate world. Like I said before, things are not quite clear. And, pretty much people, when you're in the military, you're watching real close the leadership. You become a student of leadership, and you're watching everybody that's above you and below you, but mainly above you. You're looking at them really hard because you know that they could tell you to do something, and you want to make sure that you trust and respect them. And for the most part, you do. Mm-hmm. But you don't have that same dynamic, in the corporate world. You're still looking at people because you can't help it. But it's hard to figure out where they're coming from. And, it's not as apparent whether or not you can trust them. And that to me is a little bit disorientating, because I was used to being in a place where I knew what to expect. I knew who to trust and who maybe not to trust. And it's just a lot tougher in the civilian and like I come from the defense industry. There was a natural place for me to go. But it's just not as apparent as to who, and you find that there's not a lot of real leadership in the world. There's a lot of managers, but leadership is very hard to find. Very hard to find. And it's very hard to find, although some of the best leaders I've known have been in the corporate world. the best leader I knew was was in charge of a life insurance company that I worked for. But it's, to me, that the challenge has been just finding the ground truth in a corporate setting.
Hmm. Now, Ray, your last name is pronounced Deptula?
Deptula, yes, sir.
All right. Ray Deptula is my guest here on the program. He's written a book that I think you're going to want to get a copy of because it'll help to give you a better understanding of what we're talking about. It's A Dog Before a Soldier. We're going to define that when we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. He is Ray Deptula, and he's written a book called A Dog Before a Soldier. And it brings insight to life through the story of a young man forced into the military and the ensuing war out of desperation during the American Revolution, which is rather fascinating in and of itself. I guess that's another thing too, that maybe as time goes on and we find these old homes in the attic, we find this box of documents and or letters that go back 100, 200, 250 or more years by people who were involved in these conflicts, these the situations that founded this country, especially because even if you only go back to the Civil War, that is part of what has made this country what it is. And I remember people like to quote from the Declaration of Independence about to create a more perfect union. And it isn't about creating a union that is perfect, but that there's always room for improvement, no matter where you are, even you and I as individuals. I'm always working on myself, and there's always room for improvement. You buy a brand new house and you live there for a while, and you say, well, I want to tweak this and I want to tweak that. Nothing wrong with the house, nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with the country, but there's always room for improvement. So when we start looking at these kinds of things, yeah, we'd love to stop the fighting. It would be great. And maybe one day we will reach that threshold where we can finally say, enough is enough. This is not how we play. God forbid it would be in the 22nd century. Could we do it now? I said that about when there was that invasion into Ukraine. And I would say to people, I said, look, if I had the wherewithal, I would get a ticket to Moscow. I would go into the Kremlin, I would grab that little nutball by the ear and say, I'm sorry, your mother is ashamed of you. This is not how we play in the 21st century. Of course, that would never that would be another fictional book, kind of like yours. And I wish we could do that. But we are where we are, and that's what we have to work with. And you worked with a lot of interesting things. And am I correct that it is fiction, but it is using real events or real circumstances that did take place, but your characters are involved in them in some fashion?
Yes, it's fiction. It's historical fiction. The characters are completely made up. The timeline, though, I used the events in the American Revolution as a foundation, as a current or a river, as you will, to carry the main character along. And one of the things I was fastidious about was I wanted the historical stuff to be absolutely accurate as I could possibly be, in making sure that the dates, times, places, characters that were real as needed, and so I'm pretty sure I got that part right as far as it being historically accurate. That was important to me. But it exists as a timeline, to carry the main character through.
Now, the title, A Dog Before Soldier, it's rather intriguing. My first wife, who was totally blind, had a number of guide dogs. They're service animals. Well, the military also has its own service animals. They are considered soldiers. So tell us about this. This is a phrase that is used, I guess, in certain circumstances. How did the title come about? A dog before a soldier.
It kind of goes back to what you had mentioned before about the treatment of soldiers, after the fact. And at that particular time, standing armies were considered very dangerous. And that was true in England before the American Revolution. It was definitely true during the American Revolution, where the Patriots at first thought they could get by using militias. And then they realized, hey, this is not going to be enough. We have to have a standing army. When you raise a standing army, you attract the kind of people that are desperate because no one in their right mind volunteers to do such a thing for a prolonged period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the title "A Dog Before a Soldier" specifically comes from a British naval saying at the time: a shipmate before a messmate before a stranger before a dog, and a dog before a soldier. Meaning that being a soldier was the lowest form of life, even lower than being a dog, because only someone who was desperate and capable of finding, real work would put themselves in that situation where you're just a mercenary taking money, to be a professional murderer, if you will. So your character would have to be very bad to put yourself in that position. So that's what, so the title is about my main character. He's desperate. He joins the British Army for various reasons, and he puts himself in that position to where now he's a professional mercenary, and he's considered, lower than a dog.
It's interesting that the soldier would be put at the bottom. It's almost the same sense or feeling that many people within civilian life feel about the laborer, the worker, who works at the bottom of the so-called pyramid, the business or corporate pyramid, and that the CEO at the top, he or she gets all of the benefits and the big bonuses and so forth. And it's like, well, where do you think that money came from? It came from those of us at the bottom of the pyramid who were doing all the work. Well, in the terms of the military, it's, to me, the soldier should be at the top. If your boots on the ground, you're doing the grunt work. You're doing the hard work, not the generals, not the lieutenants, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really sort of frustrating. And I know that there are people who also are of the mindset, Ray, that when in our country, of course, when Congress declares war, whatever time, whichever conflict you want to name here, it's like, okay, you declare war, but when you do that, guess what? Your kids go first. All right? Your kids get to go first because you're the ones that are dragging us into this conflict. But that isn't the way that it happens. Do you think that a lot of people who sign up, the way you put it, I thought it was interesting, that people who do sign up for the military, especially in the midst of a conflict, let's just go back to 9/11, for example, are they desperate? They have nothing to lose by signing up? Or are there circumstances where people sign up because they believe in the cause, not because of desperation?
Yeah. Well, I think that does happen. If you take a look at, just going back, we use the Revolutionary War, the first battle Lexington conquered, the people around the surrounding towns surrounding Boston, they knew that was coming. They've been practicing for that. It was just a matter of when, so when the word got out that, the regulars were out and they were marching down to Concord, people came out, through patriotism. But that was very short-lived. You had also, what happened after Pearl Harbor. You had people signing up for the military, same thing during 9/11, people signing up. But what I'm talking about here is something that was prolonged. If you take a look at the Vietnam War, where we had a draft, I mean, who actually went to the Vietnam War? There's a lot of people that didn't go because they found excuses not to have to go. And that was a very unpopular, one of the premises of my book was it was actually something that was given to me by a professor at the Naval War College where I was studying, where I got the idea to write the book. His premise for the elective I took on the American Revolution was that those that fight their nation's wars are typically those who can least avoid it. So, if you take away the sort of the short-lived patriotic responses, after catastrophes, and when it gets to be a long, drawn-out, prolonged affair, you get people that are there basically because, in a way, they couldn't find a way not to be there. Mm-hmm. And I would say, even though that we have a volunteer army or volunteer military right now, mm-hmm. it's still a lot of people in the military that are attracted to the military because their situation at home is so I would say, dysfunctional, that the military ends up being the best place they can go. And, they're not there out of patriotic reasons. They don't even understand what's going on. But for them, it's a place to get up out of whatever pit they were living in back, where they grew up. So I would still say, even though we don't have a draft right now, the military is populated by people. And I'm a good example of somebody who went into the military because I thought it was my best, and I had limited options, but it was my best option. Mm-hmm. And I didn't much care for the politics or the danger or anything else. So you still have a lot of people that are in the military that are there because that's just the best thing they're going to be able to do for themselves at the time.
Yeah. The book is entitled A Dog Before a Soldier. It is the first book in Ray Deptula's series called Those Damn Yankees, and book 2 will be coming out in not too long a time, called Can't Find My Way Home, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Ray Deptula is my guest. A Dog Before a Soldier is the latest. We're his first in the series of the Those Damn Yankees series. We certainly hope that you'll get a copy of that book. You can go to his website to get a copy. I'm sure it's available on Amazon as well, but go to raydeptulaauthor.com. That's RAYDEPTULA author.com. We'll be linked to that website as well. Ray, I want to ask you, and forgive me for interrupting you just a moment ago, but I wanted to dive into an area that a lot of people sometimes question, especially with members of the military, and even more so with those who are people of faith. They get questioned because it's like, how can you justify going to battle to take other human life, while on the other side, the same thing is true? These people have chosen to go to battle to take your life. And it seems like there is a dichotomy here, because if one is following, for example, the Old Testament 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Now, I know, too, that I saw a documentary just recently where some people started to allegedly, and I challenge this whole thing because it's been 2,000 years and now you're changing that word. Actually, the word wasn't kill. It was supposed to be murder. And I'm going, sorry, I'm not buying it. You're playing semantics here, but let's set that aside. What about your personal faith and beliefs and so forth? How were you able to balance that with we'll call it at the time, your chosen profession of being a member of the military in the Navy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a heavy decision, actually, and it's something that you have to come to terms with, particularly if you're asked to do something along those lines. Now, I don't mind telling you, I'm a Catholic. I'm a lifelong Catholic. My faith is very important to me, more so now. Not so much when I was in the military and younger, but as I get older, I get drawn back to it. But I'll give you a good example. So I was in the Persian Gulf in the late 80s. We were escorting tankers out of the Persian Gulf, and the Iranians were laying mines in the shipping lanes, as they are now, to disrupt the flow of oil in and out of the Persian Gulf. And those mines, our Navy ships hit a couple of those mines and did some heavy damage. And one in particular should have been sunk, but they killed people. The mine bumps up against the ship, blows a hole in the side. if it does so in the right place, the ship could sink. And now you've got 300 or 400, people that, could lose their life. So my job was to go flying at night with a team from the Army to go look for and take out the Iranian special forces that were posing as fishermen to lay these mines. And I could have said, look, I'm going to go out there, and my actions could contribute to taking someone's life. But if I don't do it, and then what's the other choice? You don't do it. Now you've put everybody's life at risk. Who is going to go do that? And if you don't go do it, and if someone doesn't go out there that's trained to go out there and do it, now you take the risk that that you're not going to catch these guys, and one of the mines they lay is going to take out a ship that you're on or some other ship, and people are going to die that way. So I looked at it that, look, I signed up to do this. I promised I would do this. I can't go back on my word. And moreover, if I don't do it, I'm putting the lives of my teammates at risk, and I'm not going to do that. And that was my decision. So not every one of those decisions is the same, but I like to think that our government, in getting back to another thing you'd mentioned before, I don't have a trust in government or in any government for various reasons. But at the time, I did trust the decision-making ability of those above me. And if they asked me to go out and do something like that, it was at the end of the day to save lives of our folks. I was I didn't have a problem with it from that aspect.
Yeah. If I may ask, you took an oath when you signed up, as every member of the military does. Do you remember that oath?
I do. An oath for an officer is a little bit different than the oath for an enlisted person, but basically you swear to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Which I always kind of chuckled at the domestic part, but now we're kind of seeing that maybe I always said what domestic enemies, but the oath you take is defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yeah. Something was brought up not too long ago. I was watching I love watching some of these documentaries when they do some definitions of like the Constitution and so forth. And one of the observations that was presented was that there is nowhere in our Constitution that states that what kind of economic system we're supposed to be under. Now, it happens to be capitalism, free enterprise. It also doesn't specify what form of faith or religion, choose your word, whichever you'd like. It doesn't specify that. As a matter of fact, the First Amendment is, of course, freedom thereof, that the government will neither support nor deny you the right to worship however you wish to and so forth. And it also, even though some people might put this under this category of what political system, if you will, and I'm not even sure that's the right word, because supposedly, according to the Constitution, we were set up as a republic, but many people now refer to it as a democracy. I have no idea when that changed or what have you. So I'm just wondering, about this process of understanding that document, and of course the land and the people that you took an oath to defend, preserve, protect, and defend. And how it seems to me like you take that same position my friend's bumper sticker stated, that I love my country. It's the government I don't trust. That you are there at a moment's notice. That's one of the things that I have noticed during all these. I'm 66. I'll be 66 this year. I have seen a lot in terms of natural disasters as well as other types of catastrophes in this country, and how the citizens step up to help and support and care for one another. I love that. That is the epitome of that is what has made this country a great country. You can go down the list of other elements like, okay, where do we fall educationally, economically, et cetera, et cetera. And, we're way down the list. But when it comes to being there for one another, boy, I do believe that I'm not a real firm believer in a competitiveness in that regard, but we're right up there close to the top, if not number one, across the globe when it comes. And we'll even help other people across the globe when there are problems. It's just astounding. Talk to us a little bit about your observations in that regard.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's part of our natural fabric is to step up like that. And after we were successful in the American Revolution, we were like the dog that caught the car. It's like, okay, we didn't want to be part anymore of of King George's England,
Mm-hmm.
and but now we had to come up with our own form of government. And the first few years we had Articles of Confederation, very unsuccessful. We came together in the late 1780s to form the Constitution. Our argument was, okay, we need a central government, but how big should that central government be? And from that point on, we were polarized between one side that wanted a larger central government than the other. But I will tell you that the reason I don't that I agree with that bumper sticker is we as a country were designed to have a small central government, even though there was argument about how small was small. Thomas Jefferson wanted hardly any central government. He wanted the states to be all their own entity. Washington wanted something that a little bit had more teeth that could tax and raise money and form armies, for defense. But one of the reasons I was a political military officer for about 10 years as well. I saw a lot of different governments, and they all had the same thing in common. Countries that aren't doing so well and aren't doing so well because our government is too big. And as government gets too big, it becomes oppressive. So we have almost today, in a way, the same situation that we had during the colonial times. We're starting to think that our government is becoming abusive to us. And it is because it gets too big. And, government only survives when it can justify itself. So it wants to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've had a hard time stopping that. And that's what, to me, forces the distrust. Because as I've seen other countries, they're smaller countries, but the government is too big for the size of the country. And you don't get anywhere in these countries unless you're part of the government. And when that starts to happen, now everything becomes unraveled. Our Constitution was developed or intended to stop that from happening. I'm not sure, it's going to continue. We are a republic. We're a democratic republic. We're not a democracy. A democracy is the will of the majority, and that's not. We are the founding fathers made sure that the voice of the minority was going to remain very strong, and so they wrote that into the rules. But I mean, to your point, I get it's tough as a ward of the government myself for so long, and knowing what I know, it's hard for me to completely trust even our government or any government, because as they get large, they tend to become abusive.
I know that there's a phrase that is jokingly stated, but there's a seriousness to it, and that is the last thing you want to hear from our government, our U.S. government, is I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Um, However, the government is made up of people, citizens, just like you and just like me. And they all have their own personal philosophies and beliefs. They have their own educational levels, economic status, and so on and so on and so on. And sometimes, and again, not to detract from the I don't trust my government as a whole, as a collective, yeah, we've got a problem, but it is made up of members of we the people, just like you and I are part of we the people. And I don't have the answers. That's what this program is about. We're looking for those answers, and hopefully we get a little insight from you and other guests on the program as to how we might be able to do that. I often say that we're looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. Just look around you; they aren't working. And so I applaud you first of all for the work that you are doing, and of course the book that you have out right now, which is A Dog Before a Soldier. Ray Deptula is my guest, and you are listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. He is Ray Deptula, and again, that book title has to do with A Dog Before a Soldier. That is the title. It's part of a series that he is working on. The second book will be coming out soon, and I find that one fascinating too, just the title alone, and that has to do with in the series of Those Damn Yankees. Can't find my way home. And I know that a lot of soldiers feel that way. Just touching upon that briefly, have you found your way home? And what is that you call home? What defines home for you?
Well, like I said before, I'm a lifelong Catholic. I've recently kind of come back more to the faith. I'm very much at peace with myself. I think that I spent a lot of time thinking about, what am I doing here on this planet? I think everybody is given a talent from God, and your mission in life is to use your talent for the betterment of those around you. So in my particular case, I think my talent is writing, and I think I was put here to do that. And to get back to your point, the way we could help each other is to recognize that we are all supposed to help. We are supposed to help each other. We're supposed to take whatever it is that God gave us as a talent and use it, and not use it for our own betterment, but for the betterment of those around us. And I think if we all did that, the world would be a better place. Unfortunately, human nature has not changed. People are by nature greedy, deception, devious. There's a lot of bad things about human nature. There's a lot of good things. Our forefathers wrote into the Constitution to try to mitigate the bad things and to harness the good things. Our entrepreneurship, and that's what that's what the intention was. But it's incumbent upon all of us as individuals, to live the kind of life where you're doing more good than, or in terms of aviation, more lift than drag. And I think that's what it boils down to. And I think when we get, to me personally, when we go away from believing that we were believing in God and believing that we're put here for a purpose, not our own, we run into trouble because now we don't have a North Star, and we let the bad parts of our human nature take over. And that's where we get ourselves in trouble.
Back in the 90s, I started thinking about what the man in the executive office is supposed to be. Not the duties laid out by the Constitution, but in terms of what that man is supposed to be to you and me, the citizenry. And what came to me was that man or woman should be a coach, a mentor, someone who gives us words of encouragement in down times, because they do come. We've had them. And we've had presidents who have given us words of encouragement. Unfortunately, we've also had presidents down through history who have been much less encouraging and much more deprecating, not so much self-deprecating, but, not really concerned about, so to speak, our feelings as we the people, and what we're going through. And I'm just wondering if you are seeing amongst the people in your community where you live, if you see that they are there, regardless of what's coming out of Washington, whether it's the executive branch, Capitol Hill, or the Supreme Court, setting all of that aside, that they understand their importance as members of the community of this nation, let alone the community in which they live right there where you are, and that it doesn't matter what other people are saying, they are there for themselves and for each other.
Yeah, I, like I said before, when you're in the military, you pay close attention to those above you, and of course, one of those is the president or the political leadership.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, they're supposed to be leaders. Now, I think many of them are not. There's a lot of people that are elected to office that look out for themselves first. But unfortunately, the idea was to put yourself aside and do what's right for those, your constituents, whatever that constituency is.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very hard thing to do for any human being. But to me, if you're going to be elected to office, it's your job to do that, even if it means it's not gonna work out, so well for you personally. And I think that doesn't happen. Well, I think it's hard for that to happen at any age, but it certainly doesn't happen. We have too many people today, I think, that are looking out more for themselves than they are for those, that they represent.
Yeah.
And I think also that's also human nature. There's, like I said before, there's leadership is very, very hard to find. Real leadership is very, very hard to find.
Mm.
And we've had some people that speak very well, but then do bad things, or some people that don't speak very well, but they do. I tend to look at what people do,
Mm-hmm.
not what they say.
Yeah.
Policies, not words. I don't really care what people say. I watch what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that means more to me. But it's tough. I mean, it's tough to be, I would not want to be a politician, to be honest with you, because it seems like it's a no-win situation. But we have to have leadership that cares more about those below them than they do for themselves.
It kind of answers my next question. Has anybody ever come to you and said, you know what, you've got very strong beliefs about all of these things. Maybe you should run for office. But it sounds to me like you say, I'll do more good with boots on the ground in civilian life than I would at the state or national capital to help to affect change. And I know that's a truism too, because it seems to me, I'm sure you had this experience in your military career where there were certain individuals, maybe even yourself, who did not like to toe the party line. They followed orders, don't get me wrong, but behind the scenes, they were less than cooperative to their fellow soldiers. Let's say in boot camp, you're being molded in boot camp. All right, that's where you are. How do I put this? You are trained. I was going to use a different word, but that would be inappropriate. You are trained in a particular way of life in the military. And yet it takes a while for a lot of the personal stuff to be pushed aside in order to recognize, oh, this is my training, and this is these guys. I'm responsible for these other guys and gals in my platoon and what have you. Is that kind of what we're sort of talking about here, especially when it comes to a dog before a soldier? Is that, yeah, dogs are great and they do a great job, and we hate to see them get injured or killed in the line of duty and everything. But would you say that today it's more so that you're equal when it comes to this concept of a dog before a soldier, or is it still that totem pole?
I think no. There's still. I mean, you're on a totem pole. When you're in the military, you're on a totem pole, and you may be the guy on the lowest rung. That doesn't mean you're in a bad place. That just means that your responsibilities are limited. And as you move up, you get people under you, and there's nothing more sacred than having people that work for you, that you are there to protect and care for. And as you're given more responsibility, you're given more leadership. The higher up you go. Now, Now, I will tell you, though, there comes a point where it seemed to me when you get to a certain point in seniority, it becomes more political. And I saw a lot of senior officers that sort of, to me, lost their way. It became more about their career than it did be about the people that were below them. And, almost the system almost forced them into being politicians in order to survive and get to the next rung. And what's most important for a lot of these guys is just getting promoted again. So, and they'll sing off any sheet of music, to get that. It's unfortunate, and there's very few people that will voluntarily harm themselves, to do what's right at the expense of their career. It's not supposed to be that way, but unfortunately there is. But one of my favorite characters in my book is a guy named Sergeant Searles. He's a senior enlisted man, and he's got that tough love concept for those below him, and his life is dedicated to watching out for the soldiers below him, in such a way that he was my favorite character, because I saw those kind of guys over and over and over again in the military, the senior enlisted guys that were the backbone of the military, that made everything happen. So I wanted to make sure I stuck that character in there, and he's probably my favorite one.
Well, I will tell you that I appreciate what you have done with your life. And I'm kind of trying to dance around the phrase, thank you for your service again. It was a choice you made for your life, for whatever reasons you made them. And, and you've had some incredible experiences that have formed the person that you are. Without them, you'd be somebody else. It's one of the things we talk about in terms of not regretting anything in your life, because if you could go back in time and change it, when you came back, you wouldn't be who you are today. So we thank you for writing A Dog Before a Soldier. Again, that's part of the Those Damn Yankees series. And of course, the next edition, if you will, or volume, Can't Find My Way Home, is scheduled for release in July of 2026. And you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. He is Ray Deptula, and A Dog Before a Soldier is his latest work. It's the first in this series. Ray, I thank you so much for sharing yourself, your story, your book, and your observations as we've gone through this particular hour. I have 3 final questions, but again, I appreciate what you have brought to the table for our listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much for having me, Dr. D. I really enjoyed this.
I'll ask you those 3 questions in just a moment, but first I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. Our podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we are also on YouTube and Rumble, where you can watch these conversations. I hope you'll subscribe as well as click notification. Go to Amazon.com and you can get a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, and we hope that you'll go to PayPal, and with my email address, richard@richarddugan.com, you can help us out. Send us a tip. We'd be gratefully appreciative for any amount you can send us. We'll take energetic support as well. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listening to that still small voice. With all that being said, we go to our final 3 questions for a very special guest. And the first of those questions is, who is Ray Deptula?
Well, let me start by saying that when I was growing up, my family and my extended family were shocked that I went into the military because they thought I was on my way to jail. So there's nobody happier than they are that I didn't turn out like that. So who I am, I'm a damned Yankee. I'm a down east Mainer. who managed to fight my way out of a tough situation at home. 24 years in the military. I was a helicopter pilot and a political military officer. Now I'm a proud husband with 3 stepsons and a daughter. And I've found my calling as a writer. This is my first effort, and I hope to be able to build on this. I'm just getting started.
What gets you up in the morning?
The thought of going out to work and doing something good and having a positive impact on people, no matter what I do. I tell my daughter all the time, do the best you can at anything and everything, because you never know what's going to come of that. So I just get up. What motivates me is just getting the opportunity to do a good job at whatever I'm asked to do.
And finally, what was your best day?
Probably the best day, looking back on it, was when I realized that I was a writer. I was about 10 years old, and I was reading something, and it just hit me that I could do this. And it was almost a voice that told me, "You're a writer." Now, it took me a while to actually write something, but I've known since that moment, what I was. I just procrastinated, but that was probably my best day.
Well, thank you for sharing with us this story. A Dog Before a Soldier, Ray Deptula. RayDeptulaAuthor.com is the website we'll be linked to. And we thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to all. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy, because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life and you being in mine. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.